There is a place on Earth so deep, sunlight has never touched it. And if a human were dropped there, they wouldn't drown, they would be crushed in seconds. Because down there, the ocean isn't water anymore. It becomes a force, a moving weight, a pressure so violent, it can turn steel into a liability. So the question is simple. How did humans ever reach it? We think of the ocean as a surface, but the surface is a lie. Beneath it is a vertical world. Deeper than any mountain is tall. If you dropped Mount Everest into the sea, in one place on Earth, it wouldn't even reach the bottom. That place is in the Western Pacific. A trench so deep it looks like a wound, carved into the planet, and at its lowest point, the seafloor sits nearly 11 kilometers below sea level. It's called Challenger Deep, the deepest point we've ever measured on Earth. Here's what changes as you fall. First, light disappears. Not slowly, completely. Then temperature drops to near freezing, and pressure keeps stacking. At the bottom, the pressure is over 1,000 atmospheres. That means every square inch of the outside world is being hit with the weight of a small car, constantly. So what happens to a human body? Not broken bones, not drowning. It's worse. The body collapses inward so fast, there isn't time to feel pain. Survival isn't a question of training, it's a question of physics. And yet, this place is not empty. Even under that pressure, life still exists, which means something down there evolved to treat impossible conditions like normal. So now the mystery changes. If life can exist at the bottom, what did humans find when we finally touched it? Because in 1960, against all logic, two men climbed into a metal sphere and began a descent that would take nearly 5 hours. And during that descent, they heard something no one wants to hear. 11 kilometers under the ocean, a loud cracking sound. For a moment, they thought the ocean had won. So eventually, the question was no longer if the deepest place could be reached, but whether humans were willing to risk everything to find out. For years, the bottom of the ocean remained untouched, not because it was forgotten, but because no one knew how to survive the journey. At extreme depth, the challenge isn't distance, it's pressure. Pressure increases relentlessly, 1 atmosphere every 10 meters. By the time you reach the deepest point on Earth, the ocean is pressing inward with a force that cannot be negotiated. No steel hull, no reinforced glass, no conventional submarine could survive it. To reach the bottom, engineers had to abandon everything they knew. Instead of fighting pressure, they decided to surrender to it. The solution was a sphere, a perfectly rounded pressure chamber. Because in a sphere, force is distributed evenly. No corners, no weak angles, just pure geometry, holding back the weight of an ocean. And in 1960, that idea was finally tested. The vessel was called Trieste. It wasn't sleek and it wasn't fast. It looked more like an experiment than a machine meant to carry human lives. A massive float filled with gasoline for buoyancy, and beneath it, a steel pressure sphere, barely large enough for 2 men to sit inside. There were no escape options. Once the descent began, the only way out was to survive the return. Inside the sphere sat 2 men. One was a deep-sea explorer, the son of the man who helped invent the bathyscaphe. The other was a naval officer, tasked with navigating where no human had ever been. They sealed the hatch from the outside, and with that, there was no turning back. The descent began slowly. At first, the ocean behaved as expected. Light faded, temperature dropped, hours passed. As the surface disappeared far above them, the weight of the ocean continued to build. Every meter deeper added stress to the vessel. Every sound inside the sphere became suspicious, because at that depth, noise often means failure. As Trieste passed depths never reached by humans, communication systems strained. External lights illuminated nothing but particles, drifting through absolute darkness. There were no reference points, no horizon, only descent. 5 hours into the mission, they were nearing the bottom. And that's when something happened. That nearly ended the dive, without warning. A loud cracking sound ripped through the pressure sphere. Inside the vessel, everything stopped. Both men froze. At this depth, a structural failure would be instant. There would be no time to react, no chance to escape. For a moment, they believed the ocean had finally broken through. But the sound did not mean failure. One of the outer protective windows had cracked, designed to fail, without compromising the pressure sphere itself. The structure held. The ocean had not broken through. Trieste was still intact, and the descent continued. Inside the sphere, the two men said very little. There was nothing left to adjust, nothing left to fix. From that point on, their survival depended entirely on engineering decisions made years earlier. At this depth, hope was no longer useful. Only structure mattered. Then, after nearly 5 hours of descent, the vessel stopped moving. Trieste had reached the seafloor. Below them was the deepest point on Earth. For the first time in human history, someone had arrived there. They expected emptiness, a lifeless, silent wasteland, crushed into stillness by pressure. Instead, their external lights revealed something unexpected. The bottom was covered in fine sediment, and slowly, movement, small organisms, moved across the seabed. Life, at nearly 11 kilometers below the surface, existing under conditions once believed to be completely incompatible with biology. The discovery was subtle, but its implication was enormous. If life could exist here, then pressure alone was not the ultimate limit. For humans, however, nothing had changed. The environment outside the sphere remained instantly lethal. There was no margin for error. Trieste stayed only briefly. At this depth, even success was temporary. Soon after reaching the bottom, they began the long ascent back to the surface. The ascent took longer than the descent, not because it was harder, but because nothing was allowed to fail. Every system was stressed. Every joint had already been tested beyond expectation. There would be no second chance. And when Trieste finally surfaced, the mission was declared a success. But something unexpected followed. There was no immediate rush to return, no new crew waiting in line, no follow-up descent scheduled. Instead, silence, the deepest place on Earth, had been reached, and then quietly abandoned, because reaching that depth revealed a hard truth, not about the ocean, but about engineering. The Trieste had survived, because everything went right, not because failure was unlikely. At full ocean depth, a single miscalculation is enough to end a mission instantly. And worse, there is no rescue. For decades, no human went back, not because the technology vanished, but because building another vessel like Trieste was enormously complex, dangerously expensive, and offered very little margin for improvement. Each descent would risk lives. For information, machines could gather more safely. So humanity stepped back. The deepest point on Earth returned to darkness. No lights, no observers, only pressure, unchanged and unchallenged. For more than 50 years, the ocean kept its deepest secret again, until eventually, curiosity returned, not as a crew, not as a mission of necessity, but as a single human decision, one person, one machine, descending alone into a place where failure would leave no witnesses. In 2012, a human returned to the deepest place on Earth, not as part of a crew, not as a government mission, but alone. This time the descent would carry a single person into complete isolation. The person was filmmaker and explorer James Cameron, known for imagining impossible worlds. This time, he chose to enter a real one. He didn't go because it was necessary. He went because curiosity had not faded with time, and because the question still remained, could a human return to the deepest point and survive alone? The submersible was smaller than Trieste, faster, more advanced, but also more unforgiving. There would be no one inside to share decisions, no second voice, no backup human presence. If something failed, there would be no discussion about what to do next. The descent took hours. As the surface vanished above him, communication grew intermittent. Light disappeared completely. Outside the vessel, pressure climbed to levels that destroy conventional machines. Inside, there was only one human heartbeat and thousands of tons of ocean pressing inward. When the submersible reached the seafloor, Cameron was completely alone. No external help, no rescue plan. The nearest human beings were nearly 11 kilometers above him. At the deepest point on Earth, he became both observer and failure point. This was not exploration driven by necessity. It was exploration driven by something else. The same force that sent humans into space and into the deep ocean for the first time. A need to see what exists beyond environments we were never meant to enter. At extreme depth, there is no such thing as a small problem. Every failure escalates instantly. A sensor glitch, a power fluctuation, a communication delay. Any one of them can force a mission to abort, because at these depths, there is no rescue. Several deep-sea vehicles never completed their intended dives. Some lost communication long before reaching the bottom. Others suffered structural damage. That forced an immediate ascent. In multiple cases, missions were terminated just kilometers above the seafloor, close enough to see it, too close to risk continuing. At full ocean depth, failure is final. There is no external intervention, no recovery operation. If a vessel collapses, the ocean closes in instantly. Nothing returns, no signal, no debris, just absence. These near misses explain something crucial. Why so few humans have ever reached the deepest place on Earth, not because of lack of curiosity, but because every descent accepts a level of risk that cannot be reduced further. At extreme depth, perfection is not a goal, it is a requirement. The reason humans can't go much deeper is not fear, it's not lack of ambition, and it's not technology falling behind. It's physics. Because pressure does not increase gradually forever, it accelerates, and at a certain point, it stops behaving like a problem that engineering can simply solve. Every 10 meters of depth adds another atmosphere of pressure. That means the deeper you go, the more force presses inward on every surface. At full ocean depth, the pressure is so extreme that materials don't fail slowly, they fail suddenly, without warning. Modern submersibles rely on titanium pressure spheres, syntactic foam for buoyancy, redundant systems for survival. But even the strongest materials have limits. To withstand greater pressure, structures must become thicker, heavier, and eventually too heavy to descend at all. Strength begins to work against you. At extreme depth, every improvement introduces a trade-off. Stronger walls reduce internal space. More safety increases mass. More mass requires more buoyancy, and more buoyancy adds new points of failure. Eventually, progress stops being progress. It becomes a balance that cannot be improved further. This is why the Challenger Deep represents more than a record. It represents a boundary. Not one set by courage, but one set by reality. Beyond this depth, human presence offers little advantage over machines and far greater risk. This is why exploration changes here. Sensors replace observers. Autonomous vehicles replace pilots. Data replaces experience. Humans no longer descend because the environment does not allow for adaptation. At extreme depth, there is no acclimatization, no training, only tolerance for a brief moment and then retreat. Not every environment can be explored indefinitely. Some places resist, not because we haven't tried hard enough, but because they operate under rules that do not bend. The deep ocean is one of those places. It does not adapt to us. We adapt to it, or we leave. We often compare depth to height. Mountains can be climbed repeatedly. Higher peaks are reached by training, acclimatization, experience. Depth does not work that way. There is no gradual adjustment, no biological adaptation. The deeper you go, the environment becomes instantly hostile. At extreme depth, humans exist only as passengers, encased in machines that temporarily hold reality back. Every descent is borrowed time. The moment the machine fails, the environment reasserts itself completely. There is no negotiation, only collapse. This is what makes depth a true boundary, not a challenge to overcome, not a frontier waiting to be conquered, but a line that cannot be crossed without consequence. Beyond it, human presence adds no advantage, only vulnerability. Technology allows us to touch the boundary, to observe it, to briefly enter it. But it does not remove the boundary itself. Each improvement buys seconds, minutes, at best hours, never permanence. This does not diminish exploration, it defines it. Understanding where limits exist is as important as pushing against them. The deepest place on Earth teaches us restraint. It reminds us that some parts of the planet are not meant to be occupied, only studied. So when humans reach the bottom of the ocean, they didn't conquer it. They visited it, briefly, and then they left. Not in defeat, but in recognition that the boundary had spoken clearly. Humans reached the deepest place on Earth, not because we belong there, but because curiosity demanded it. For a brief moment, we crossed into an environment that does not tolerate life. And then, just as quickly, we left. The deepest point on Earth does not tell a story of conquest. It tells a story of limits, of physics over ambition, of environments that remain unchanged, no matter how advanced our tools become. Down there, the planet sets the terms, not us. This is not a failure of exploration. It is a reminder of its purpose, to understand the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. Some discoveries are not about staying. They are about knowing when to leave. The deep ocean teaches us that progress is not unlimited, that some boundaries are permanent, and that respect for those boundaries is what allows exploration to continue elsewhere. Hidden Earth. TV explores the extreme limits of our planet, from unreachable depths to forgotten places on the surface. So if you want to understand the environments that exist beyond human survival, Subscribe to Hidden Earth TV